Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rugby with the Pads. I'm Sam, and today I'm going to be taking you through a bit of combine footage and looking at some of the rookie stars that are going to be coming into the fray and see what they've done for their stock in the upcoming draft and your rookie drafts if you're in Dynasty as well. And we'll also look at a bit of free agency. Recording this right in the middle of a bit of free agency frenzy. We're on the we're on the Friday of free agency, so technically we've had 4 and a bit days. There's been a lot going on. There's been a lot not going on as well. So we'll go through some of the content for you guys today, and we'll try and do it a little differently as well. For those of you watching on YouTube, or actually for those of you watching on audio as well, please do feel free to come and take a look at the YouTube. We have been experimenting a little bit with audio and video files and seeing what we can do to, I guess, make this podcast a bit more multimedia. So in a bit we'll get into it a little bit. We'll show some videos of combine footage, and I'll give my viewpoint on some notable players. And yeah, we'll just see how this one goes. It's a bit of an experiment. That's what the off season's for. But we have a lot to talk about when it comes to free agency, and there's a lot of transactions to take a look at. I'll take a look at my other screen, but I would recommend if you can go and take a look at all the transactions, because this feels like the biggest free agency period that we've had in a very long time. There's loads of outstanding stories, and I think the two that are obvious are Lamar Jackson. Where is he going to go? Is he going to stay? He's been franchise tagged on the non-exclusive franchise tag. So if any of you don't know what that means, I have tried to get my head around it, but I think that means the Ravens have the right of first refusal. If he gets offered a contract that he likes, they can match it and he can stay there. So it's almost like they're testing the waters for him. And if he goes, they get 2 first-round picks. I think Lamar is potentially worth more than that, but he's been put into a position, I guess, that maybe this comes from the lack of having an agent as well, driving that early demand. But he could become a Kirk Cousins and start going and testing the league year in, year out, and making a hell of a lot of money. Kirk Cousins, for being a very middling quarterback, has made a lot of money in his career. And of course, it goes without saying, Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be a Jet. Or is he? I think everyone is reporting that he's going to be a Jet, and they're just working out the compensation. But at the moment, my concern is, and B, having some Aaron Rodgers stock in Dynasty as well, my concern is that the Green Bay Packers don't need to move him straight away. He hasn't got major cap hits until the season starts. I think it's September 1st, so they can wait till after the draft, and then leverage that for even more picks down the road. Green Bay have obviously decided to move on, and they're going to start in Jordan Love. I think that's gotten into interesting fantasy connotations, but we'll see what happens there. But there's plenty of other important moves for fantasy as well, and we'll take this with a fantasy viewpoint. We'll in a couple of weeks we will go division by division. We'll go around the league, taking a cue from my favorite podcast around the NFL, and we will look at the fantasy connotations once all the dust has settled around free agency and some of these trades as well. But there are some really, really important ones for fantasy, and I think there are some ones that I just want to highlight now. Raiders getting Jacoby Myers and Jimmy G, that's great, but losing Darren Waller, I think that was a real hit. But I think it could be very interesting for Jimmy G and Devontae Adams getting someone who's relatively reliable. I don't think it's an upgrade necessarily for Adams, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it's a definite upgrade for Josh Jacobs in that offense as well. I think, even though it's less fancy relevant as well, the Bengals losing 2 key safeties in Von Bell and Jesse Bates, that was kind of important to them, because they were the only team, I think, to really stop the Chiefs last year in any meaningful, last couple of years in any meaningful way. And losing 2 key safeties is going to be interesting. But they have reinvested on offensive line. Hopefully that means for Joe Burrow, or Joe Shiesty, as he likes to be called now, I think. Is that his kind of moniker now? It's going to be really interesting to see how he does moving forwards. Obviously, we have the legend Mike White going to Miami, Heineke in Atlanta. I think that's a bit of a meh deal. I projected Lamar Jackson going to Atlanta, but they said, no, we don't want him. Don't know why. It seems obvious. We've also got Johnny Smith going Atlanta. Do they trust Kyle Pitts? Are they going to move away from him? I think he's a complimentary piece personally. Darnold in San Francisco is sneaky interesting, as is Baker in Tampa Bay. They could be decent QB2s if you a push really. Spot starts throughout the season. I think Darnold will get some more play than maybe you think he's going to get. Gino re-signing was obviously brilliant. I think he was a great fantasy asset last year, and he will continue to be so in a very consistent lineup in Seattle. So the Seahawks are going to be great there. Derek Carr going to the Saints. I think it's a bit of a meh deal. He's an upgrade on Andy Dalton slightly. And then we've got Woods released and then signing with the Texans. For me, that's really nice because as a Rams fan, I really, can you tell I'm a Rams fan from behind? I really like Robert Woods, and I'm really keen to see him do better elsewhere as well, because he had a bit of a short end of the stick over at the Texans. But there have been some sad cuts as well. Thielen being cut, I think he's a cap casualty. Obviously, you've got Jalen Ramsey not cut but traded away, big cap casualty as well. Some less sad ones in Wentz and Mariota. I'm not too bothered about those guys, but yeah, there are some interesting plays, and of course you've got Zeke. I think that's going to be a big cut for the Cowboys. He was the poster boy for so long for Jerry Jones. He's the poster boy for Jerry Jones basically. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do elsewhere in the market now they've cleared some cap space. But obviously Tony Pollard, running back one, I'm really interested to see that moving forward. And saving the best till last, we've got the wide receiver, not the wide receiver, the first pick of the draft traded away by the Bears for DJ Moore, the number 9 and the number 61. I think the Bears walks away with that. They've got a true number 1 wide receiver for Justin Fields to throw to. Let's see if we've got what we think in Justin Fields, and they walk away with some assets that they could build for the future. I'm thinking that they've got offensive line, defensive line requirements. They can do a lot in the first round here. And the Panthers, obviously, in a bit of disarray. They're signing weird veterans left, right, and centre. We'll see what happens. But that's not what we're here to talk about today entirely. But that's where we're at the moment. We'll go into a bit of a deep dive in the next few days. We're going to take a look back a couple of weeks. So I can't remember when the scouting combine was, but I think it was it was the start of March. I probably missed a week or so, just because life happens. And what we wanted to do is go back and maybe look at some people that you haven't looked at in the past, some people coming into the league who I think can make an instant impact, especially in Dynasty, where your rookie drafts will either be happening now or coming up in the coming weeks. Ours is happening a bit late. It actually happens after the draft. A lot of leagues draft before the draft, those rookies, to see how your projections really are, and that's almost hard mode for you. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look through some draft prospects, and we're going to have a look and see whether we think they're going to be good or bad or ugly. So after a quick break, I'll see you on this side and we'll take a look. So we're going to go straight into it, and what we're going to do, for those of you watching on stream here on YouTube, you'll be able to follow along with the YouTube clips that we're going to be playing as well. We're going to take these from the combine workouts and maybe highlight a few interesting players along the way, but generally go position group by position group, and let's see who's interesting and who's really piqued our interest, because I think there were some interesting things to say across the board. We'll start with traditionally the least interesting positions, the tight ends. You guys, if you're listening through this last season, know how I feel about tight ends, and then we'll get on into QBs, wide receivers, and we'll finish off with running backs, and we'll have a bit of fun at the end. If we've got time as well, we'll do a little bit of a rookie mock draft to show you how I think things are going to turn out. So fingers crossed our transition works here. Again, you're missing out if you're not watching on YouTube. So we'll start off with the tight end position, and the tight end position I think was relatively interesting, and I had a bit a stake here. So I'm going into this year's draft with a couple of first round picks and some third and fourth round, and I'm looking to target a tight end in the third round as well. There were some people who we weren't particularly interested in, but there were some really key players here. We've got Michael Mayer that we were interested in. Darnell Washington was a real standout, and we'll go into him in a second, and Luke Musgrave as well. But start with Michael Mayer, 6'4", 265. He's a Jason Witten type. He's a really big boy, someone who'll be potentially used quite a lot as a blocker. He's quite intelligent when it comes to that. Maybe less of a run after catch, which I thought they picked on him in college for a little bit. But he's a bit of a possession guy, end zone threat. I think he is. What's the comp I'll make to modern? He is the Robert Tunyon of a couple of years ago. I think he will be in the end zone quite a lot. I think his stock actually dropped a little bit, and we're just seeing him on the screen now in his 40. Let's just watch this. His first one was a 474, 472. So he's pretty fast. He's not the fastest. I think that's a bit pedestrian when you're coming to players who play these hybrid positions, like Michael Mayer does. I think he should have been really seen as an athlete, but he was a bit more pedestrian, which sometimes you get that. You have a bad day. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he plays if he has a pro day, how he catches, and generally how he interviews, because I think tight end is a very intelligent position you need to play. He's quite cumbersome for his size, but maybe it's not necessarily his game. He's a bit more cerebral. There was other players on the board as well. We've got Luke Musgrave, really took my attention as well. He's 6'6". His comp is potentially Dallas Goddard. Not the strongest route runner, but he's an all-purpose player who really could be the number one tight end in this draft. I guess I'm taking all this with a pinch of salt, and the person I really want to talk about in a minute is Darnell Washington. Again, you're talking about seeing on the screen, because I don't think any tight end in my memory has really come out the blocks in their first season in the NFL and really made a huge impact. Let's skip forward a little bit. We've got some blocking and pushing drills here as well. If you're watching, the broad jumps was really interesting, and obviously, the catching drills is what you're really interesting. We're seeing Michael Mayer catching on screen here. I feel like his hand placement is good. Maybe doesn't feel like he's going to possess it as well. I don't know. It's hard to see when you're seeing them basically run around in their underwear. But we are going to take a look at Darnell Washington in a bit more detail. The sixth lineman, as I think he's called on Twitter or something like that. He was absolutely electric. Again, his 40-yard dash, pretty good. It was pretty. So just for those of you watching on YouTube, we just skipped out a little bit. It's pretty good. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the slowest. He was solidly towards the top end of the pack. But for me, it was his catching. It was really fantastic. He's got some great numbers. He's absolutely enormous. Here's the comp, Mercedes Lewis. I don't know whether that's a great comp these days to have, because Mercedes Lewis stock has definitely dropped in more recent years. But let's take a look at some of his route running and catching here. He looks slow, but he is lengthy, and yeah, he looks so confident catching the ball over the shoulder there. He's got some great, great arms on him, great legs on him. He's gonna do well, and catching run after the catch. I think it could be really interesting because he's got a humongous stride as well. But there was one clip that I saw. Very explosive there. It might be this one actually, where he catches it on the sideline, and he just does an absolute number on everyone. I think that really, really, oh, here we are. We'll skip to the end a little bit. It really took it good everyone interest, because his awareness and his one hand catch ability, that was like, that was Kyle Pitts-esque. He could be a wide receiver there. You might argue there his toe was out of bound, but he has just been playing college, and you're allowed to do that in college. So maybe there's something to be said about that, and how he adapts to the NFL game. But I will be thinking, if I looked at those three guys that we talked about, Darnell Washington is a real interest to me, and I would be looking towards him in a lot of drafts. Moving through the positions, let's take a look at quarterback. And there was a lot of quarterback to be talking about here. Obviously, there are some obvious ones. You had Bryce Young. He's tiny, but how tiny is he? He weighed up pretty well. He's small. He could be a bit of a Kyler type. There might be a bit of a risk there, especially based on recent tendencies with Kyler Murray as well. We've got Will Levis. He was a better prospect than I think a lot of people gave him credit for. I think he's going to have a high to mid first round potential. He's definitely got one of the best arms there, and he kept CJ Stroud in check, pass for pass as well. And there were a couple of other players as well that we took a look at, that maybe we weren't as excited about going into the combine, that we are coming out of the combine. And on your screen now, you're seeing one of them. We have the man, the myth, the legend, Anthony Richardson, who basically could have tried out at any number of positions: tight end, lineman, running back, wide receiver. He was an absolute physical specimen. And you know what? I'm just going to give him a bit more time on your screen. Let's look at the kind of core highlights for him. You obviously saw that incredibly fast 40. Let's look at that again. 444 on his first go, and on his second attempt he just looked like he was taking it in stride. He is going to be one of the fastest straight line speed guys. He is enormous though. He's absolutely enormous. What is he, like 230 pounds or something silly like that? He's humongous. they're comparing him to Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson, and he actually went by Cam Jackson as his kind of nickname as well. But it was the jumping and the explosive nature of him for a 40.5 inch vertical leap. Here we get see him as a bit of a basketball player as well. I think he could be the this year's raw talent, and he has probably been the guy that I think has really shone amongst those QBs and really stood out for himself and given himself a real good chance of being someone for the future. I mean, in my mind, you can't teach physical talent or that physical athleticism. That's something that you're either born with or you develop over your puberty and into college as well. What you can teach is game worthiness. I think is probably the way to define it. But the ability to read the game moving forwards. You're not expecting a huge amount of him. You expect him to be athletic in the first year. Yes, some of his stats weren't great in college. I think he had a worse completion percentage than Zach Wilson did last year, which isn't great. But if you're looking for a raw talent and you've got the right system for him, I would love to see him go to Baltimore if they lose Lamar Jackson, because he would be plug and play. Maybe not quite as electric laterally, but he will run down a guy. He will absolutely take him in. He would have been great for the Panthers, but obviously they're going number one now, and you would expect they're going for someone like CJ Stroud, and that's probably one of the other guys that I wanted to show off a little bit. We're going to skip past some of the physical stuff, although he wasn't slow. His 40-yard dash, 4.37. Actually, no, that was someone else. That was a wide receiver. Excuse me, I'm completely out of order here. But he was pretty good. I think it was okay. He ran some good. He was running some good drills as well. He had some great passes. Here again, we're seeing Will Levis, Will Levis really took CJ Stroud note for note on the passes. So I'm really interested to see how both of those play out and in their long-term careers, because I think they're a bit more similar than we give them credit for. But I think CJ Stroud has definitely played himself in to be the number one. If it's not Bryce Young, it's going to be them 1-2 if there's any doubt about that, and I will probably go to the bank with that as well. There were some other players out there that I think were interesting to see at the combine as well. Hendon Hooker, coming off an ACL tear, a bit older. He ended up sitting out at the moment, which is a bit sad. But I think it was interesting seeing Stetson Bennett again, who's a bit older. I think he's about 25 coming out of college. But he's an interesting player. I don't think he'll be good enough to stand out and not be a day 3 pick. So towards the back ends, I don't think he'll go undrafted. I think someone will take him as a backup, a bit like Brock Purdy, and he could have that kind of career as well. Coming in relief for someone who is really superior to him, and seeing what he can do. I reckon he could definitely do some damage moving forward. So it'd be interesting to see how the rest of these quarterbacks lay out there. But gave you a little bit of a preview earlier. Let's go through the speedsters and let's take a look at the wide receiver. There were some great names here, and I think this is rare where the draft is probably at its deepest. And I'm really interested to see how some of these prospects come out. And there are some names here that I think really brought themselves out here. Let's get through a couple of names to start with. We've got Quentin Nelson. He's a big tall boy. He's found the end zone, but can he find that consistency with a team? And I think he showed out pretty well in the combine. He was great. Zay Flowers, he's a little slot dude. He might not be well sized enough, so it was interesting to see how he played out as well. His 4.42 was 4.42.40, sorry, was good. He's not too explosive, but he's got excellent body control, I think, and he showed that on a lot of the routes he played and lots of routes he ran during the combine. So interesting to see where he goes about. Let's see if we can nail down him a little bit, and or some interesting players. Jordan Anderson we'll get onto in a minute, but there are some other ones as well. There's a lot of kind of, I would call them almost gadgety, smaller guys like Parker Washington, small but powerful. He's maybe a lower grade, but he could be a sleeper. If you're taking, if you've got a 4th round rookie pick, I think that could be a play to play. Jalen Hyatt comps to Deshaun Jackson. Team is going to want him for his speed. We've seen him in the past. Henry Ruggs, well, that didn't work out well, and Tyquan Thornton going quite high in the draft just based on their physical straight line speed. So whether he'll get a high draft grade and a high draft position, we'll have to see. But left the best 2 till last. Let's take a look at Jordan Addison, who I think was electric. And if I, you know what, I'm a really big fan of Tyler Lockett. I know a lot of people have issues with his consistency, which I completely get, but his splash playability is going to be great. And I think the challenge for Jordan Addison, as he's seen during his college career, will be whether he can get out of that boom or bust mentality. He only had two TDs over the last 7 games, and he weighed in quite small and slight, but he was really impressive in cone drills in the 40. Yeah, it wasn't tremendously fast, but yeah, he did his thing, and he just looks smooth. Let's take a look at him. You know, picking up on this route as well. He just looks smooth in everything he did. I think he'll end up landing in a high first round based on historic, and maybe, you know, we're looking at his sophomore season record in college as well. But you know, just look at this, just easy. He tracked it the whole way. That's what you want to see over his shoulder. Again, if you're listening to this on audio, I'd recommend you just take a look at the YouTube, see what we're talking about here. Might give you a bit more context, and yeah, we're trying to push some more people into that way as well. But yeah, he was great, and yeah, there's seen him. You know, just looks electric when he's running there. Very accurate route running, and it'd be really interesting to see if he goes as the number one overall wide receiver. But the person that I would be putting my stake in is Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think that's how you say it. In my mind, he's your possession guy. He's one of the best overall. He didn't do the 40, but what he did do is show off his hands. And you know, even there, when it's a bit low, he caught it really well. I think he just moves a bit different. He's probably going to be the best wide receiver available. Is he going to be the first one picked? I doubt it, because he, you know, has to fit a need. He's definitely slot, and he's going to be contested, and he's an interesting player. You know, he's gonna. I think he'll have a long career, and if you're looking at dynasty, you want players with long careers. You want to see your investment there. There's a lot of college highlights. Let's skip past those a little bit, but you know, here's your comparisons: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, all from Ohio State. You know, all very similar metrics. All, you know, I think, you know, I didn't realize Jackson Smith and Jigba actually a bit bigger, so maybe he'll be a bit more. Bit more sturdy in the league as well, where he's going to go up against some very seasoned veterans, depending on where he goes. I'm really hoping he goes to a good team and gets some good supply. If he starts off as a number 2 in the slot, that's great. He can be complementary until he gets that kind of number 1 position that, you know, we all want to see him take as well. So I think he's going to be a great prospect. And you know, a bit of a, you know, spoiler for our mock draft in a bit. He's someone that I am going to be looking to take early if I can, and he's probably someone I'm going to be looking at depending on how he falls as well. And yeah, so someone that I think could really do you well. But let's get on to what we all came for, running backs. Now, running backs is going to be a really interesting position this year, because although Bijan is going to be the number 1 guy, he's just going to be the number 1 guy, isn't he? I think there are a lot more names out there that I think you could take a look at and could, you know, really provide you with some really talented play, and I think they're going to have some longevity in rookie draft, or if you're drafting running backs. You want to draft youth because you're more likely to get a peak in your youth. Maybe not year 1 because they're not picking up blocking schemes as much, but year 2, year 3 is really interesting. But you know, these guys are going to be tested. They're going to have a lot of snaps. Hopefully, if they you know, get with the scheme pretty much, they're not asked to do too much, and they're asked to, you know, become athletic freaks that they are. And it'd be really interesting to see how they all play. On the screen at the moment, we've got Jameer Gibbs, who I think was so fast, and we'll get on to him in a bit more. But there were some really interesting other players as well. We've got your typical bruisers and your early down backs in Sean Tucker. I guess for him, can he prove himself to be a bit more of a third down talent? We've got Dion A.K.A. I think that's pronounced correctly. He's small, but he's got, you know, super fast pace. Maybe more of a return guy. Can he improve with his hands? We'll see. Tank Bigsby, big by nature, big by name as well. He is a big boy. Will he live up to it? I don't know. Will he try and do too much? I think part of his issue at college was he maybe tried to take on a bit too much, you know, take on a couple more tackles than he needed to. And maybe he didn't really have much contact balance, which was a bit funny for such a big guy as well. He also wasn't that explosive despite all this, and his combine figures for the 40 was about 456, which was a bit on the lower end. He was fine, but he really didn't stand out. And I think, when everyone was looking towards him as being fantastic, there was a lot better runners around him, like Devon A.K.A. As well. Sorry, not Devon, not Dion. Apologies for that. A lot of new names to learn going into the season. There was Kendre Miller in the mix as well. He's big, but does he have that burst that you really need in the second level? Jack Charbonnet, maybe a bit more of a AJ Dillon type. Here he is. He just looks big, doesn't he? I think he's going to be really good. I think the question there, because of where he played, is will the game be too quick for him? And then you've got some players like Ibrahim here. I think it was interesting. We've got Rashawn Johnson and Ty Spears as well. I've highlighted as well. Massive production at college, but he's maybe not a three down back. And for fantasy, that's what you're really looking for. But there were two standouts, as I mentioned, and these are the guys that you're probably targeting early in your drafts. And we'll start with Jahmyr Gibbs, who was fast. Just really, really fast, wasn't he? He's just shy of 200, 436, 40 time. He's fluid during the drills, and we'll just check one of his 40s, and then we'll go on that. We'll go on from there. He looked really good for yards after catch as well, and yards after contact as well. It'd be really interesting to see how he goes, and if he's positioned in a place where he can be a faster version of Alvin Kamara potentially. Let's just take a look at him running here. It just looks like he's quick off the mark. That explosiveness here he's with a catch as well. Maybe a bit loose in the route there, but you've got to catch him first. I think that's really, really key. He's small, he's slight, but I think he could be a really interesting player. And I think if you miss out on the obvious 101 in the rookie draft this year, Jahmyr Gibbs isn't a bad shout. And again, spoiler alert, he might be someone that I'm looking at as well. But of course, you have Bijan Robinson. He's huge broad jump. He is the second coming of Saquon Barkley, and the hope is that he gets on a good team. There's lots of projections that he's actually going to buck the trend of running backs and actually go in the first round, which scares me a little bit. Do you know what I mean? If he goes in the first round to a team that's needy of running back, you'd suspect he might go out earlier in the first round and not go to a good team who did well last year, not go to an Eagles or a Chiefs or someone like that. I don't know why I'm picking those two, because they were in the Super Bowl. But what if he goes to someone who just is going to run him into the ground and he's not going to be useful for you? That's my one concern about having so much high end talent and so much perspective ability. 215, 5'11". He's a big guy for a 3-down running back. I think he's going to be really interesting, and would be interesting to see how he plays. He wasn't the fastest on the 40, but I think he's got so much more than that. And again, his production and intangibles are going to be really interesting to see moving forwards. But these guys weren't the only guys who ran combine drills, and of course, Rich Eisen got involved once again in his Rich Run. I just wanted to see him here and give him a little bit of credit, because he has got to take a lot of balls to run against even mythical versions of edge rushers. Absolutely looked like he was running him down there. But well done, Rich. And I'd recommend, if you followed any of the combine content, to go and have a look at Rich Eisen's charity efforts for St Jude's Hospital. It's a really nice thing he does, and I think it's well worth it, and it's all in good fun here as well. So that is ended. Thank you for watching our combine coverage. We'll do a bit more coverage of rookies in general moving forwards, and we'll see what happens over there. But in a second, we'll get on into a fantasy draft for rookies, and we'll take a look at what my dynasty draft is going to look like. So let's take a look at a rookie draft. Now, in my dynasty team, you've probably already heard it if you've listened to us this last year. There's going to be some interesting interesting play this next year, and we'll do some breakdowns of what's happening in my dynasty league. You'll see that I have been notably given the 101. That's because I came dead last in my dynasty league last year, but unfortunately I gave it up for a quarterback last year, who didn't actually do me that well. I thought it was the missing piece. Ended up my entire team capitulating. So I amassed a couple more draft picks elsewhere. I've got two other first rounders. I've got a higher third rounder, and I've got a fourth rounder as well. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, in general, it wasn't a good season for Dynasty, and I am well and truly in a rebuild. At the moment, I've got a lot of needs. I've got Najee at running back. I've got the pair from Washington, which is interesting. I've got CEH, and I've got the Rams rookie Kyron Williams as well. And of course, Michael Carter, who I think could well be a good number two to Brees Hall given a full season. And now that James Robinson is out of the building, whether they've got the faith in him or not, there's yet to be seen. I've got quarterback. I'm doing okay. I've got Rodgers and Herbert. Rodgers obviously going to the Jets. I think he could be better this year. He's got limited time. I've got potential for Baker to be a good spot starter as well. This is a super flex league, so I really should be playing two quarterbacks at any time. Wide receiver, I'm pretty happy. I've got Pittman, Osborne, and I've got some other bit parts as well. It's not as important on that one, even though it's PPR. And again, tight end could do with some. Basically, I need someone everywhere, and I'm targeting one of the top three running backs, ideally. I've already spoken about. I want to target Anthony Richardson. No matter where he goes, I think he's going to be. I think his talent and his yeah, maybe not on field talent yet, but his athletic ability will shine out. I'm really interested in that one. The best wide receiver I can get is going to be good, and as I mentioned, I'm avoiding tight end, but there are some fun ones. So I'm going to see, where the draft lies. But without further ado, we're going to start a draft. It's against the computer, so apologies for that. It's not going to be, hugely interesting to you. But let's start here because we're just going to be based on what my competitors are doing as well and what their lineups look like. But quite often the computer takes the best player available, so we get quite similar. But let's see what happens here. Let's start the draft. And as you'd expect, Dan, who's been a frequent collaborator and contributor to this podcast, is projected to go with Bijan Robinson. I think everyone projects that to happen, with him going 101. Dan has been after him for a long time. I think Dan was willing me to lose in the toilet bowl so he could get the number one spot and make sure he secured that guy. Dan is not far away from having a championship roster, so let's see if Bijan Robinson can put him over the edge. Then we have Ed and Caroline, or actually no, sorry, Caroline has given up her team to someone else as well, so that's a shame. But we've got Alex is playing now. Alex and Caroline are going to be in the mix as well. Sorry, Alex. Who is it? Alex and Ed are going to be in the mix. We've got them projected to go. Bryson. Yeah, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I forgot his name there for a second. Apologies for that. And I think that's kind of what we would expect. That those first three picks are really interesting. Where it gets interesting for me is the middle of the draft order, and this has landed just how I want it to. I've said I want to target Anthony Richardson no matter what. So with the fourth pick of the draft, I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson. Again, I don't think he's going to be fantastic this year. I think he's going to be a bit of a berserker. I'm not looking to win this next year. I'm looking for a rebuild year. If I can do okay, amass a couple of draft picks along the way, that would be nice as well. And yeah, just rebuild my team. And then I'm left with a bit of a decision. And I'm thinking about how my team looks. And let's get back on the screen here and let's look at my team and how it looks. We're going to be doing the draft in a couple of months now, so it's coming up pretty soon. But I've got I've got Brian Robinson. I'm really interested to see him because I think he could be a number one. I think it's going to be a very run heavy team over in Washington. Najee Harris hasn't got any competition at the moment, really. I think they might roll out the bell cow if he's given a full clean bill of health. Michael Pittman could be interesting if they get Lamar Jackson. I think he could be a true number one again. Cortland Sutton, he's gonna. I hope he comes good one day. Allen Robinson is a bit in no man's land. KJ Osborne. So I'm kind of thinking, am I tending towards wide receiver? And because I feel like I'm actually a bit better at running back. I mean, can I get much better with a rookie running back than I can with Brian Robinson and Najee Harris? The problem is, this year there's a lot of teams who are doubling up on running backs, and we're not seeing those bell cow backs that you once had. Najee Harris, that kind of draft capital for him isn't going to be seen anymore. And I think maybe we're inflating the position a little bit. So I think it's all going to be dependent on where they go. But if I can, and if he goes to a great place, although I think based on the free agent market, I'm tearing myself up here. The decision I'm making is between obviously Jameer Gibbs and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is the best wide receiver available. No matter where he goes, he's going to have ability and talent, especially if he's out of the slot. So he'll be asked to do a little bit less on that. Maybe he's physically very able as well. So I think that's something to be notable of. Jameer Gibbs is maybe more of your third down switch up back, so maybe he's not going to get as much play. Plus, a lot of teams are tooling up around them and have multiple backs. I mean, just look at Detroit with Swift and Montgomery now. Eagles have got Rashad Penny, who is a very much a pacey back as well. So you know what? Even though I would love to take running back, because I always say to take running back first, and listen to my draft 102, which will come out in a few months as well. A few months, hopefully a few weeks actually. Let's see when it comes out. But my draft 102, I am tending away from running backs in the first round, and I like wide receivers. So I'm going to take the best player in his position available, and it's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I'm going to go for it. I've gone for it. And immediately after, as I would expect, Gibbs goes then. Then we've got not Jamar Addison. What's his name? I can't remember his name now. Jordan Addison as well. Will Levis, Johnson, and Charbonnet goes at the end of the first round as well. So there are still some decent running backs available, and this may be where I actually go and play. And I'm looking at my kind of draft scouting, and I'm thinking, Sean Tucker could be quite interesting. He's an early down back, which means he's a bit simpler. Devon A.K.A, is he going to be that every down back? I don't know as well. Zach Evans is interesting. Let's see what his player card said. Oh, he's at the combine, so we didn't see him at all. So I'm not going to draft him yet because I'm not convinced he could be fantastic. Elsewhere, we've got Keishon Butte. I don't think I need any more wide receivers, and I'm not going to go after Michael Mayer, despite everything. I feel like I've got a good run of tight ends because tight ends aren't going to make the difference in this league. I've got some bit part players. I've got people like Gerald Everett, and I've got who's the first round? Trey McBride from last year as well, who, if Zach Ertz continues his decline, I think could be really interesting. So I am going to be targeting running back in the second round because I feel like as soon as there's a run on them, once you get past Tajay Spears, it gets a bit into no man's land. So I want someone who is going to provide me some value. Now, Devon A.K.A, no news. So Sleeper hasn't updated all the news on here. Zach Evans, as we said, was out with a hamstring injury. No news for Tank Bigsby. So obviously these guys didn't do enough to really show off their worth. But that's why you need to go and take a look at this podcast on YouTube, and maybe take a look at some of the content that we pumped out there as well. But I'm going to go with what I think is probably I've gone for physical specimen in QB. I think I'm going to go for another physical specimen as well. And Devon A.K.A, he's small, but he's got sprinter's pace. He's not going to be asked to do too much contact, but he's going to be fast. And sometimes fast is all you need. And I'm going to go with Devon A.K.A. He might become the next Tevin Coleman or Rashad Penny. Let's go with him and let's see what happens. Immediately after, as we'd expect, computer goes ADP and goes Michael Mayer. Fun enough, team 2 in this mix does actually need a tight end. Then we get a run on those running backs, and again, I don't pick after that until the fourth round. I said earlier incorrectly I have a third round pick. I don't, but we've got some interesting players, and we see, by the time it comes back to me, players that I would have liked to take a look at, some of those quarterbacks who might have been interesting as a second look. Hooker over there, Ben Bennett that we talked about. Max Duggan I wasn't particularly high on. Tajay Spears was probably the last running back on my board. Zach Evans, it was interesting. And unfortunately, the fun tight ends that I might look at in the actual day, and I think they might become available because I think people tend to target running back and wide receiver and quarterback first. I think in a real life situation, Washington may become available to me in the fourth, but let's take a look at who is actually available. Marvin Mims, that's interesting. because he was projected to go quite high. Again, there's no news on this. I don't know why I keep clicking that. Marvin Mims is really interesting. I'm probably not going to target any running backs down at this end. Yeah, there's no one really who looks at, let's say, Parker Washington. I've highlighted in my scouting as well. Could be really interesting. If we look at tight end, there's no names really who jump out. Maybe Zach Kuntz, just because his name is slightly funny more than anything. And sometimes you just want to have a bit of that. Ultimately, I think 3 of these guys are going to go into my taxi squad. And for those of you listening who don't know what taxi squad is where you hide your rookies that you don't want to play. There, it's like redshirting them if you're familiar with college football. So I'm going to go and double up on wide receivers because I feel like although I've got some good young players at wide receiver, owning a position is really, really interesting. And I'm going to go with Marvin Mims because I think he provides a lot of value at this level. So my draft was really this was interesting. I've done this a couple of times, and this is a bit different to the way I've done it before, and it's come out a little bit. Maybe the machine is learning a little bit. So what I've come out with is Anthony Richardson, Devon A.K.A, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Marvin Mims. I kind of wanted a better running back, but I think there's so few available. By the time you get here, he's the 4th, and there is a definite drop off after 2. He was the 4th picked, and you've got a drop off after the first 3 wide receivers. So when you get into Keyshawn Butte, maybe you've still got a lot of value. Zay Flowers has some value. You may be looking at 2nd or 3rd round. This is only a 10-man draft, so if you've got bigger, go earlier, I'd say. But I'm really happy with the fact that I got Richardson here, and he would fit very nicely in a slot where I've currently got Mike White, the man, the myth, the legend, but he would fit there. I'd probably look to ship off Jalen Tolbert, and depending on if he starts, Desmond Ridder as well. I probably don't have a huge amount more love for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I didn't trade him as early as I could have. Bobby Trees is up for the chop on this roster as well, as is Sky Moore, potentially if he doesn't show out. Ben Skowronek, I think, could be interesting next season, depending on if they get anyone else. And Isaiah McKenzie, I didn't realise he's sneaky old. He's 27. I didn't realise he's been in the league quite so long. But I thought he had flashed moments last year, but really didn't do much. And, I've been cursed by Allen Robinson so many times. I hope he comes good because I like him as a player. I liked him on the Jags. I liked him on the Bears. Let's see what he can do. He was on the Jags, wasn't he? Am I being silly? Let's have a look at his old game log. It wasn't in 2013, 2014. Oh, he just doesn't say here, but I think he was once upon a time. But yeah, since being on the Rams, he is disappointed, and he's just generally a disappointing fantasy player. I don't think I've seen anyone draft him with certainty that he's going to be great. But I think if I get a draft like this, I'll be very happy as well. There are some interesting picks as well. I think Team 2's picks were very interesting. And if we go have a look at where was it? Was it Team 5? Team 5 was where I picked up Dan's picks as well. He got Bijan Robinson, but came up with a QB no name, doubled up on Zach Evans at running back. That's a really interesting 1-2. I think they could both be good. Josh Downs and Tyjae Spears, both quality wide receivers as well. Sorry, wide receiver there, and they got Tyjae Spears, another running back. 3 running backs in that draft. I don't think that's particularly realistic because I don't feel like his team really needs that, but we'll see how it plays out. Anyway, that is your lot for today. So I'm going to love you and leave you. The next time you'll hear from me will be in a week or so, probably after the free agency frenzy has disappeared and has faded from our lives, and we'll go through all of the East Division. Will do a bit of a competition, AFC versus NFC in the North, South, East and West. So that'll be 4 different episodes that we'll do around the league. Hopefully give you a bit more content for you to listen, because there's not much to talk about between now and the draft. We don't have much. We just got a lot of pro days and people floating around and second string starters being passed for nominal draft pick changes. But thank you very much for listening. As always, if you listen to the show, really appreciate you. Thank you very much for listening this far. Please feel free to support the show as well. We've got a number of different ways you can support us. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok now. I did a TikTok the other day and we got 1,000 views over 24 hours. I was amazed by that. I'm 34. I shouldn't know how to TikTok. And we've got some other ways you can support the channel as well. Support the channel? Support the pod. Sorry, it's a pod first, channel second. This is definitely an audio first experience with a little bit of visual if you should so want. But we've also opened up the ability to support us on Buy Me a Coffee as well. So you'll be able to see that on your screens now. But you can find me at Buy Me a Coffee at Rugby with Pads. Thank you so much again for listening or watching wherever you are, and I will see you on the virtual gridiron.